So, hi
Yeah.
everyone. Today I'm here with Bob Veres. Bob Veres needs no introduction. He was formerly the editor of Financial Planning magazine. He now organizes the Insiders Forum, a conference for financial planners, and he also publishes on Inside Information, a newsletter for financial planners. So, thank you very much, Bob, for being here today. We're going to be speaking about the future of financial planning, how to succeed as an advisor, and your new book, The New Profession. How are you doing today?
Well, life is good. Doing
Excellent,
great.
excellent. So let's go straight into it. I really enjoyed reading your book, and there's a number of things I'd like us to talk about that will help our audience succeed in their careers. The first thing that was quite interesting is how, in the beginning of the book, you talk about how financial planning is an emerging profession. And in many people's eyes, I imagine they'll think, hold on, haven't financial planners and advisors been around for decades? Why do you phrase it as an emerging profession?
Well, I don't think there's any question that a lot of people are acting as professionals. There's a lot of true professional advice being given out there. But somebody like me can hang up my shingle and say I'm a financial planner, which is a scary thought for any true professional, and people less qualified than me. So, number one, there's no real barriers to entry to being able to call yourself a professional. Beyond that, we don't really have the standards in place that we need. Not everybody has a CFP or a PFS designation or a CFA, which I have a lot of respect for. A lot of people are walking around with designations they got over various weekends. And there's no real regulatory effort to determine who can and can't call themselves a financial planner. So we got a lot of, and then the educational stuff. You go to a college, and one college offers you a certificate, another offers you a degree in finance with an emphasis in financial planning, another offers you a degree in finance that happens to have a bunch of financial planning courses. They might be in the home ec department, or I forgot what they call the home ec department now. I'm dating myself. Or they might be in some other department. So we don't really have the groundwork in place to be considered a true profession. And then you've got, all the regulatory issues where
Mhm.
salespeople are walking around calling themselves financial planners.
Understood, understood. So the emergence is the kind of the collation of skills, regulation going in a certain way, where now we're getting a body of people, a body of knowledge who are true professionals. So that's why you say it's emerging.
Right. We're not at the place where doctors, lawyers, accountants are, but we're moving in that direction. And the main thing I wanted to say in the book was that we have this goal. I wanted to define the goal. We're so focused on the fiduciary debate or compensation models. The goal isn't really those things. It's an aggregation of a lot of things which add up to being a professional. The goal is creating a profession, and I wanted everyone to recognize that as we move forward. And then I want to help everybody succeed who is acting as a professional.
Okay. So what's quite interesting again about the book is I was reading this late at night a few days ago, and I actually got it was late at night, and I was in bed, and I was speaking to my wife, and I just got a bit of a shock because a little ways into the book, you start talking about how, and it was a bit of a surprise, how financial advisors, financial planners are in the business of bringing fulfillment to their clients. They're not about managing stocks and bonds. Really, it's a fulfillment profession. Sounds very similar to some of the things I've read from Nick Murray. Can you talk a bit more about how planners are actually more about fulfilling people's dreams than they are about managing money?
Well, there's a couple of elements to that. The first is the profession has heretofore been mostly about managing money. And managing money is becoming commoditized. In my view, the real value is all the procedural stuff that financial planners learn as they go forward. How to organize people's finances and also how to help them navigate. But the question is navigate to where? You have all this professional expertise, but you have to have a reason for it to be applied. And so the fulfillment, that's the dream, if you will, is that people will have better lives as a result of the advice that they get from financial planners, just like people will have better health if they get advice from doctors.
Hmm.
Now, I think there's a lot to reform about the medical profession. I would like the medical profession to be what I aspire the financial planning profession to be, which is preventive and aspirational rather than just fixing problems.
Understood. Okay. So traditionally, then, advisors, what they're focused on is making sure people don't run out of money in retirement. And you're saying that we need to go beyond that.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
Mm.
Retirement, in fact, I think a lot of people are not ever going to retire. And so if they're not ever going to retire, what do they need retirement planning for? The, the goal there is, in my view, making work optional
Yeah.
and then helping them find fulfillment in their lives, find a career that they enjoy, and then helping them move into that career. And these are all procedural things that most people have no idea how to accomplish. People in the financial planning profession have a huge advantage over the rest of the population in terms of understanding how to get from here to there in this cruel jungle of financial services. There's an awful lot of complexity that you and I understand, that financial planners understand, that the average person has no clue how to navigate.
Yeah. Understood. But maybe this is not what, a planner signed up for. 20 years ago, if they got into the profession, they thought they were going to build a plan, make sure someone hit their specific financial goals. Now it sounds like they're almost going to turn into a life coach of some sort. Is that what people really want to do? This is a major change.
Well, I think life coaching is a lot easier than people realize. You go through a process, and I talk in the book a lot about the collaborative process. I think collaborative financial planning is the future, mainly because that's what clients want. And what clients want is what a profession should deliver. But you go through this collaborative process and you help people understand what they want out of life. And if they understand what they want out of life, then they're 10 steps ahead of the average person. They are among the upper 1/10 of 1% of the human population that has a clue what they're trying to get to, where they're trying to get to. And that's really just a process. That's not really a something that you have to have a lot of expertise to do. You have to have a good process for helping people get there. And then any professional advice you give is toward a goal. People help people achieve retirement. Well, that's a goal. All I'm suggesting in the book is that you broaden that perspective to a few other goals.
Mm-hmm.
And then, once again, you're giving financial advice. You're giving advice about procedural and investment issues that will get you to this plethora of goals rather than a single goal. Most people signed on to help people achieve their goals. They just didn't think there were that many goals. That was the difference, I think, between then and now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. All right, so that's interesting. And if we just shift gears a little bit, although it's quite related, talking about the change in the industry, let's talk about the part in the book where you mention what you think is important for someone to be a successful financial planner. Talk about your time at Financial Planning Magazine and how you collated a lot of ideas and what it takes to be very successful. And the number one item you put in your book was an openness to change. What do you think at the moment financial planners are resisting, which they should embrace?
I'm gonna date myself here a little bit. Years ago, I remember when software was first introduced into the profession, and we were chiseling things out of stone back then. And this new software thing, I remember a lot of advisors said, "Hey, I'm not using this automated financial planning stuff. And others were scared of it. They were saying, "Oh my God, this is replacing us. A spreadsheet. People can do on a spreadsheet what we do." And eventually people realized that software was the best friend of the profession, and a whole bunch of other software tools were developed, and people eventually adopted them. Now, all of a sudden, we've got these robo tools, and it looks like the same thing all over again. All it is software 2.0. It's intelligent software.
Mm-hmm.
It's software that starts thinking. And my advice to people is get used to it, because the next generation of Intel chips are going to have as much processing power as the human mind. The generation after that will have double the processing power of the human mind. And when programmers get a hold of that kind of processing power, the software is going to do a lot of rote work and a lot of low-level thinking.
Mm-hmm.
any activity that you do, like manually rebalancing, like any manual activity that the software can do, should be done by the software. And so I think a lot of financial planners are doing a lot of work by hand that could be done with something, with a tool, basically. And beyond that, I think we need to adjust to the millennial generation. As you know, the millennials think differently from the baby boomers. And in part, they're very suspicious of the idea that you can add value on the investment side. How much alpha am I going to get and how much am I going to pay for that alpha? Well, if I'm not convinced I'm going to get any alpha, I'm not willing to pay for it. So the things that financial planners are really good at, they're not really embracing as their value proposition. The thing they're really good at is helping people become wealthy and more focused in achieving their goals. A lot of financial planners are resisting that value proposition, I think, to their detriment. And I think the next generation of consumers, who should be this generation of consumers, are going to demand it. And beyond that, I think most advisors are resisting the idea that they should work with people who are less wealthy. We've got this AUM revenue model, which means you have to have already achieved wealth before I'll help you achieve wealth, which makes no sense to me. So I think most advisors need to embrace the retainer revenue model rather than the AUM revenue model. And boy, there's resistance to that.
Yes, there is.
And retainers, you can work with anybody on retainers.
Yes,
as long as they have cash flow, they can receive the benefit of your advice.
And what is the resistance to this? Is it just because it's hard for people to express the value proposition to potential clients and prospects? Is it the whole idea of, instead of taking money from the portfolio, it's sent directly from the client's bank account and they can feel that money more? What do you think it is?
You have the advantage of not having yet ossified. When you become older, this is a hardwired issue. This is not just, some procedural issue. The older you get, the more you get set in a certain way, the more resistant you are to some new way of doing things. And what I tell most baby boomer advisors, the people I grew up with, is let the next generation figure out the next revenue model and the next service model and build the firm they want to inherit. So it's not there's any particular obstacle. It's that as people get older, they become less willing to adjust what they're doing. Most of us have seen one too many changes in tax reform. We've beat up on one too many software demos, and we're tired. We don't do that anymore. So the next generation of millennials, they're eager and ready to do something new and different. My advice is let them do it.
Mm-hmm. And how that change of mindset, that willingness to take on these new tools and let the next generation decide, how do you develop that as an advisor?
I think you've got to give up on the idea that you've arrived. One of the interesting things about life itself is there's no destination. We are always evolving, always changing. And, I just saw a graph the other day from some futurist, and he was showing how he was showing the rate of change in society, all the things that are changing right now. And he graphed that against our ability to change, our hardwired ability to adapt. And for the first time, our rate of change has breached our ability to adapt. In other words, things are happening quicker than we can adjust to them, if you will. I would submit to you that the baby boomers are not the ideal people in your firm to be in charge of the adjusting and making decisions. At the very least, you should take the people who are most flexible and let them handle the changes.
All right. Great advice. All right. So moving on to next topic I'm quite interested in is the marketing and client acquisition. So for those of you listening, please definitely go out there and buy the book, because you've got a ton of tactics and strategies as well to help people with the whole client acquisition puzzle. But the main thrust of your argument is the importance of focusing on your existing client base, although you give ideas to get clients from outside people you already know, but focusing on existing clients. Why is that such a big emphasis for you?
Well, of course, 90% of people's new business is coming from referrals.
Hmm.
So there are really three things that I talk about. One is I think people need to expand who they're reaching out to through the different revenue model and service model to people who are not wealthy yet. So that's the first thing. Is that opens up 90% of the human population rather than the 10% that you're marketing to now. So to start with that. But once you go through once you create a fun collaborative process with your clients, once they go through something they enjoy rather than something, I've had people tell me that working with their advisor was like having a root canal. And for those people who are watching this who've never had a root canal, it's not a pleasant experience. It's not something where you would say, hey, let's go out and get another root canal, you know? And so having that pleasant experience rather than that painful experience means people are a lot more likely to refer you to other friends and neighbors to people. So when you open up your office to a lot more people and you open up the process, you make the process more fun and user friendly. And I talk about that in the book in some detail. All of a sudden, people are willing to refer you. I've done consulting with financial planning firms, and I've talked to clients, and I asked them, I said, you know, you're getting value out of this relationship. Oh my God, I'm getting huge value. It's the best thing I ever did. Are you referring this firm to other people? No, of course not. Why would I do that? And I said, well, why not if you got all this value? And they said, because the process was so painful to begin with. I had to financially undress. I had to fill out forms. The financial planner buried his nose in my portfolio rather than in me and who I am. And so once you create a fun process, they're going to invite other people to go through that fun process and get the value from getting the advice from financial planners.
Understood. All right, that's pretty clear. One topic I'm very interested in, and this is towards the latter end of your book, is about client service. And then you continue on going on and talking about behavior and the whole lizard brain and how an advisor's job increasingly is managing client behavior and how that's, going forward, or probably also representative of the past, the major determinant in them, actually achieving their goals. Now, I speak to advisors pretty frequently, and what I hear from them is a definite reluctance to exercise control over clients and tell them what to do. Obviously, an advisor is clearly not an order taker. They're not, the client is not there to say, I want to do this, you execute. But then at the end of the day, if I say, well, it's the client's money, if they say they want this, then I got to do this kind of thing. How do you think you manage that challenge in that client behavioral situation?
Yeah, these are great questions. Thank you for that question. The part of the book talks about how I was on, it starts with an experience I had where my kids talked me into getting on a roller coaster. And I didn't wet my pants, but I might have, the experience was enough to have triggered that response. And yet I knew I was going to survive the free fall that I was put into, but there was a part of my brain that simply wouldn't accept that logic. And I was frightened out of my wits. And then they carried me off, and my kids were eager to go on another ride, and they had to revive me first. And it was a mess. And I experienced what people go through when they go through a 2008 downturn. We're not talking about telling clients, here is your risk tolerance. We're not telling clients, this is what you have to have in the portfolio. What we're doing is creating a portfolio that they feel comfortable with, and then reminding them at key moments, like the 2008 downturn, that this is exactly the moment you hired me for. If we sell now at the bottom of the market, then you're going to lock in losses and it's going to be a mess. We're going to make some money in this market, but not today, not tomorrow. But I promise you, markets don't go down 100%, but they do go up 100%. So your upside is greater than your downside, or at least your potential. Mm-hmm. Those are words that you're not making the client do anything, but those are important words for them to hear at certain inflections. Mm-hmm. I apologize, my phone went off and I didn't turn it off.
That's okay.
I should. So managing the client is really about helping remind the client that you, with all your experience in the markets, have seen this before. And I go back to 87. I saw 87. The markets were only down about 4% in 1987, but everybody remembers the fact that they went down 25% in one day.
Hmm.
Markets do that. Markets behave strangely, and if you respond to the fear, then you're going to lose money. That's the way. That's the wisdom that advisors can impart on their clients. They don't have to do it every day, but there are probably 10 or 12 inflection points in the course of a relationship where that's important advice.
Hmm. But for the client to heed your advice, it's predicated on you having a good relationship, right? And there to being trust between the two of you. If you've messed elements of the relationship up in the past, then it's hard for them to listen to you when you hit that point, that problem, right? So this is a long term game, right? You know it all starts with how you acquire clients, how you nurture them, how your relationship for years leading up to this point will impact how they respond during a crisis.
Well, of course, you have to develop trust. Financial planning is fundamentally about behavior change, and people don't change their behavior as a result of somebody they don't trust. And this is why, I think the profession is migrating from sales to advice. There's an awful lot. When I started out, it was all sales. Back in the 1980s, when I first started writing for Financial Planning or first editing Financial Planning magazine, the profession was sales. We've come a long way from that. But there are a lot of advisors out there who still see their value in a marketing rather than an advice context. And I don't think a marketing context is the way to build sales. I mean, the way to build trust. I'm sorry.
Hmm.
Trust is earned, as we all know.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, all right, so moving on now to our final question here. What advice would you give to your 30-year-old self, firstly on career and then secondly on life?
To my 30-year-old self,
Hmm.
wow. The book is full of all these ways to trick yourself into being successful. And the trick that I like the best, that I wish I had known 30 years ago, was to talk to my future self and befriend my future self. And it's something I talk about in the book a little bit. But it's basically there's a you 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 5 years from now, whatever the timeline that you want to create. And maybe you want to befriend several yous. And then you ask that you, what do you wish, what do you want me to do now so that you, 10 years in the future, will benefit? You, who will be me 10 years in the future, will benefit.
Yes.
And I guarantee you that future self is not going to say, you need to watch more television. You need to sit around on the couch more often. It's going to talk about relationships. It's going to talk about putting your nose to the grindstone and getting something done. Mostly it's going to tell you to do things that you've been avoiding. There are any number of things that we put off because they're hard, but they're often the things that will benefit us the most 10 years in the future. And that, once I got to know my future self, he was a very reliable source of great ideas about what I should be doing now.
Hmm. Excellent, excellent. And that cuts across both career and life advice. So you managed to get two birds with one stone with that.
Some of it sneaked in there somehow.
All right, excellent. So just to wrap up, can you tell the audience where they can get your book?
Okay, it's my website's pretty easy to find. It's bob@bobveras.com, and you go on there and you click order, or in another week they should have finally put a picture of my book up there. But there's an order now tab you can go to, and I have no conflicts of interest whatsoever in saying it's an absolutely great book. It's just terrific.
I could actually second that. It is a great book. I really enjoyed reading it, and yeah, I encourage you all to go out there and to purchase it. So thanks very much, Bob. Thanks for being here today with me and discussing your book and thoughts on the financial planning industry. I appreciate it.
Thanks, John. Thanks for asking great questions.
You're welcome.